This podcast acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waters throughout Australia where we record this podcast. We pay our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and the Ngunnawal people and Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation and their elders past and present. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Day One, the Maddocks podcast talking all things clerkship and commercial law related. You're joined as always by Maddocks lawyers Sophie, Edgar and Sam Ejtemai, and we are so excited to have you join us for another episode.
We've got a really nice episode today. We're going to talk a little bit from post-interview stage. So coming up to offer day, what clerkship offer day looks like, just a little bit of some practical tips on the LIV guidelines, what you can and can't do. And I think the really important part about today's session is the actual clerkship at Maddocks. So in relation to the advice we're about to give, this is about our experiences with the Melbourne process. We know that the New South Wales and Canberra structure is slightly different. Unfortunately, we didn't go through that process. But if you do have any questions about that specific process, feel free to reach out to one of the Maddocks grads, LinkedIn or through your networking processes or your student universities. They'll definitely be able to have some information about there. But this is just about Sophie and I's experience from the Victorian process.
But also something to look forward to in this episode is an interview with Caroline Atkins and Gavan, Mackenzie.
They do such cool work. It almost made me want to get up and go to Canberra and go work for them. I hope my partner's not listening to this.
Yeah.
But they do such cool work in their team.
Such cool work. So Caroline and Gavan are both partners in the Canberra office, and they do work within the procurement, technology, commercial sort of Commonwealth Government work.
Yeah.
And it is so impressive. They are such an important part of, the commercial industry and also the government sector. I loved listening to what they do.
Yeah, totally. And like a lot of really interesting tech deals coming into Australia and the interplay with big private clients, technology and federal government policy, how it interplays with society.
Cool.
Yeah, and totally. And, coming into the AI boom like that practice is just going to be doing some of the most exciting work in Australia.
When we were interviewing them, I was thinking, maybe I'll be moving to Edinburgh.
I think it might be competitive.
Yeah.
But that's we won't give too much away. We'll save that for you guys to have a listen to. Let's dive into about what happens after your interview at Maddocks.
Yeah, offer day. So once you've gone through the process and, congratulations of getting through the interview process, that's like quite stressful in itself. So after you do your interviews, we then have offer day.
And I think there's so many misconceptions on offer day, but it's pretty scripted. You're covered by the LIV guidelines. So if a firm is a signatory to the LIV guidelines, which not all firms, but the majority of firms that offer clerkships generally are, I know Maddocks definitely is a signatory, which means that they need to comply with the rules of that year. Offer day is on a set date for this year. Those dates will be out on the LIV website, and I recommend that you have a look at that. And I assume that your clerkship guide from whatever university
We'll have that information.
We'll have that.
Yeah.
So generally offers will open at a certain time and first round offers will come out either via telephone or email. I think most firms do emails. I know Maddocks does an email or has done an email in the past.
I think an email first and then you might get a call.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So I think something that was really helpful for me is just having a little bit of a plan for the day. So, if you're someone that has done one interview, I think the day looks a little bit different to someone that has more than three.
Agreed.
I think whether you're 1 to 3, you kind of, if you get a call or an email, you're gonna be accepting because you can only take up to 3. And if you have more than 3, then I think having a little bit of a plan for the day is really helpful. Something that's important to know is that you are able to hold an offer for a period of time. And I think it's a couple of hours. I think it's, maybe 2 or 3 hours, but you can't hold more than 3. I think you don't have to answer them straight away on the phone. And the reason I think this is important is that there's 3 slots. So you have a summer one, a summer 2, and a winter 1.
Yeah.
Often they will clash. So you will put your preferences in after your interviews and you'll say, look, ideally, I would like to do my Maddocks clerkship in summer 1.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. And if in the event that, come offer day, and this happened to me, that I had 2 firms with the same time slot.
Yeah.
And so, you can't accept on the spot. And it's totally okay. And generally that's why the email comes, because the details are in the email. And that's when you need to contact a firm and say, look, and it happens every year. So don't feel that it's a completely unique situation and that they've never heard this before.
Yeah.
It is totally okay to contact a firm and say, hey, really excited, really want to come to Maddocks. I've got a clash. Do you have room to move?
Yeah. And I think they're expecting that, like HR know on the day that kind of inevitable that there will be various timetabling clashes, and they're pretty good at being flexible where they can. Yeah, keep that in mind, that you can reach out to them and you can contact them to sort of work that around so that it does, suit both.
Yeah, put your preferences in and they try and accommodate that the best they can. Inevitably there might be a clash, and that's totally okay. Don't stress on the day. Feel free to pick up the phone, contact HR, and just be open and honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably the trickiest part to navigate on offer day.
Something to keep in the back of your mind and be aware of, because it does happen quite a lot.
Absolutely. And I think having a plan going into the day is really important. You want to have made that decision the night, like at least the night before, if not earlier.
I think the other thing to remember on offer day as well is that the day can go one of two ways, and it can be a really, really exciting day for you, and it can also be a day that maybe you thought might go a little bit differently. So just remember to be kind on yourself. I'd also recommend, I wouldn't be messaging if you've got lots of other friends that are going through the same process. I probably wouldn't be messaging and reaching out to everyone straight away. Let the time settle until you sort of get your head around what your day looks like. Just also, it's good to remember that there's so many people that don't get clerkships, and I know heaps of people at this firm in particular that didn't go through the clerkship process. Absolutely. So there's so many different avenues and journeys, and don't be too disheartened if it doesn't work out for you this year.
100%. I think that's really good advice, particularly around the messaging on the day. I think people will reach out when people want to reach out.
Yeah.
I was muting my phone, like my social media. Just block that out. Just make sure the phone can ring. Make sure you got good reception. But like you said, it can go one of two ways, but it's not the be all and end all either way.
No, it's not. And if you've got a job, or if you're meant to be working on offer day, I'd probably recommend to take it off if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't, that's fine. Like, it's not the end of the world, but I think it's a day where you probably just you want to be available to answer calls, and you want to be around to go through the process and the motions, and likewise, if it's not your day, then you might not want to be at work, or you might.
It might be a very quick day, and offers open at 10 a.m. and it could be done for some people, really quickly. It all lines up perfectly, or you've interviewed somewhere, they contact you and say, look, we're happy to offer you a seasonal clerkship, and at 10:10 the day's done and you're really excited. But there's multiple rounds of offers. They generally will try and fill it all in round one, but if it doesn't work out, then there's a second round and potentially a third round as well. So I know many of my friends got very late calls on the day, like after 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So you hope it finishes early, but it is also a longer day. So like you said, if you've got work or if you've got plans, I think try and block out the day.
Block it out. Yeah, agree.
So you've gone through the process, and let's say you've got the phone call from Maddocks or the email, and you've got a seasonal clerkship, and you're in summer one, December rolls around, November, December rolls around. You're rocking up on day one.
Well, first of all, congratulations. It's very exciting to sort of get to the end of that application process and actually be walking into a firm and getting to experience all of the actual, exciting parts of the process. So well done. What does day one look like at Maddocks?
The day one is really fun. So the Maddocks Clerkship, and I think we've talked about it a little bit in our sessions before, it's set up a little bit different to other firms.
Yeah.
Maddocks does, like most firms, a 4-week clerkship or internship or whatever you want to call it. And you rotate through 2 different practice groups. So a couple of weeks before your clerkship, you'll get an email from the firm asking you to preference the areas that you want to go into.
Yeah.
And they really try and do their best to accommodate everyone's preferences based on obviously what you've put down, but also your application, your interviews. They're really good at aligning that. And then during the clerkship, you will get 2 rotations. So for me, I did a rotation through the property development team, and then I did a rotation in the construction and projects team. In each rotation, you'll get a supervisor, you'll get a buddy, and you'll just get immersed into the team for about a week and a half each.
Yeah.
So that's about 3 weeks of being in the team. You then get about a couple of days of training at the start, which I'll talk about in a second, and you get probably about 3 or 4, maybe 5 days of firm-like events.
Yeah.
Which I'll break down in a second as well. So all up, it's around 4 weeks. So taking us to day one is you show up and you get all your tech, which is really fun. You get your laptop, you get set up with like your username and all that sort of stuff. And the first couple of days are just sort of, I call it tech training.
And getting to know your fellow clerks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is kind of the best part.
It is so much fun. It's funny, the day we're recording this is day one for our seasonal clerks here in Melbourne.
It is.
At the moment. And Sophie, you're a buddy?
I'm a buddy, yeah. So exciting.
Right.
And nice to be on the other side of it.
Yes. And there was a morning tea this morning.
Yeah. So the clerks came in and got to meet each other, and then they'll be getting set up with their tech and all of that throughout the rest of the day. But they also went down this morning morning and had a morning tea where you meet with your buddy and your coordinator. So your buddy is just hopefully someone that is just there to answer the questions that you might want to ask. Your coordinator, a friendly face around the firm, and then your coordinator's a little bit more responsible for helping you get work.
Yeah.
Get stuck into things within the team. So you get to meet, your team that you'll be working pretty closely with. So that's super fun.
Yeah.
And then, like you mentioned, back upstairs into the boardroom. You spend the first couple of days with your clerk cohort in the boardroom, which is actually so nice because it's a lot of time to spend together, get to know each other and become like quite a cohesive group. Mm-hmm. So makes training more fun, that's for sure.
Absolutely. You learn about iManage, our document management system, about Maddocks styling, how we draft letters, how we dial things, how to navigate our intranet, all that sort of stuff, all the essentials and foundations that you need.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear from other people within the firm. There's some sessions with some juniors, some partners.
Practice group.
It's jam-packed. It goes so quickly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're off for lunch very shortly with one of the grad partners. Don't they do that's today? They head out for a nice lunch. It's a really good soft entry in. You're not going to be thrown into the deep end day one. And so that will go until, like you said, a couple of days in, and then bang, you're into your team.
Yeah.
And then you get thrown in, and that's when the excitement happens.
That is when the excitement happens. It's if you don't know what teams that you want to go into before you're preferencing or anything, don't stress about it. Just pick some teams that you think that you might be broadly interested in. I don't think the clerkship is too much about, you solving your career goals of what type of lawyer you necessarily want to be. It's just getting a general gist of what happens within various teams.
Yeah.
Good to see if it either confirms what you thought it might be or it might be something that's completely different. So it's really great to be able to do the 2 rotations within Maddocks because it gives you a good taste to 2 different groups.
I think something that really stands out about the Maddocks Clerkship is that double rotation. Yeah. We get asked a lot, what's it like swapping teams after a week and a half? Is it too short? Is it I think it is incredible for multiple reasons. As a clerk, you're not expected to come in day one and solve really big legal prudence issues and change the world. It's about coming in, giving everything a go, having a crack at something, and just being enthusiastic and getting a taste for what it is like to be a junior lawyer.
Yeah, half of the reason why our rotations are shorter is because it's more about you going through the process and you getting a taste for it. And it's great that you will get to do some work throughout that process, but I would definitely recommend, don't take on too much. I was certainly very focused on, at the time, I was like, I need to work for as many people as I can so I can get to know as many people as I can and do, show that I've got time management skills and all of this, which I probably now think is not necessarily the right way to approach it. Take the pressure off yourself. Like, just do the work that you can manage and take on, and I would not be working late nights or any of that because it's not what the clerkship's about.
And the teams are really mindful of giving you some exciting work that you would get as a junior.
Yeah.
But like Soph said, just not to overextend yourself. And I think that week and a half allows really good period of time where you get to throw yourself in, like have a real crack at something, do a couple pieces of work.
Yeah.
You work with a couple different people and you get a good taste. But you're not going to be overstretched. You're not going to be super stressed. And I think a week and a half, anything like, if you're in the team for 4 weeks, I think it starts to drag on a little bit.
Agree.
It's like you're going into an ice cream store and you're getting a little sample. Like, you're not going to sit down and have a whole pint on day one. Like, you want to try what flavors you want. And that's what the clerkship is. You're going in, you're trying different bits and pieces. You're working with different people.
Yeah.
You're building relationships. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and in those weeks, I think something that the partners certainly say now, and as well as lawyers across the firm, is if you're wanting to show anything within those couple of weeks, focus less on, obviously you're going to do good work. It's the reason that you got clerkship. Everyone's pretty confident in that. But the skills, like your soft skills, getting to know as many people as you can, whether that be having a coffee catch up, just show that you're genuinely interested in the law.
Yeah.
And that you're interested and intrigued by the work that people do, that, even if that might not be the area that you 100% want to go into, you're still curious by the type of work that team does.
Yeah.
If you can show those skills, that you're enthusiastic, that you know how to take instructions, that you can ask questions when you need to, I think you'll be set up pretty well.
Absolutely. And it's a really good opportunity to network across the firm. So you might be coming into construction and, you might go to your buddy and go, hey, Sam, I've not done any construction law before. This is my first time. I'm really excited to get a feel for it. But I also was really interested in property law because I heard, Adam and Michael talk about the property development practice. Is there any chance I could speak to someone in property? Exactly. That's totally okay. And that's a really good way to network across the firm.
For sure.
And that's what the clerkship's all about.
Just use the process to your advantage as well. Work out ask the questions that you want to know. Ask the juniors across the team what it's like to work as a junior, and if that's the type of firm that you think that you could see yourself beginning your career in. What's the graduate process like? How does that all work?
Yeah.
I think if you can have those fully informed discussions with people, it makes your life a lot easier when you're trying to, decide where you want to start.
Yeah. And then there's all the fun stuff that happens as well. There's lots of social events that go on.
Yeah.
The firm put on like monthly or bi-monthly sort of staff events on the deck where the clerks come to as well. The last set of clerks were a really tight cohort. They had a table tennis tournament going on, which was really fun. And I think a lot of people in the firm got involved with that, which is cool initiative of the clerks. The grads take the clerks out on a night. Like it's
fun.
It's a
fun 4 weeks.
It is a very fun 4 weeks.
Fun as it is, you'll probably be exhausted by the end
of the zonked. Yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, after the first couple of days, you'll be exhausted.
Yeah.
Because it's like anything, meeting new people, starting something new for the first time, wanting to make a good impression. It's exhausting. So be kind on yourself. Everyone within the firm's been through the process and knows what it's all about. So everyone else is going to be kind on you. You just need to remember to be kind on yourself as well.
Spot on. And I think there's no silver bullet. I think people always ask, how do you stand out in a clerkship and how do I be successful and make sure that I get an offer at the end of the process?
Yeah.
I think being yourself, being authentic, being genuine, and the number one tip that everyone gives, whether they're someone who's just finished the clerkship process or a grad partner, is to be enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Show a genuine curiosity in the type of work that the firm does.
Yeah.
If you're given a task, ask follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Show an interest in not just what am I doing, why am I researching this specific point, but why am I doing what I'm doing? How does this fit into the bigger picture of what the client's trying to achieve? Like that level of enthusiasm. Okay, can I just come along to a meeting? And whether you're just sitting there and taking notes, just that proactiveness, that is the best way to stand out.
Being really proactive can sometimes be quite intimidating, but that's why you've got your buddy and your coordinator you can go up to them and say, hey, this partner, they might have their door shut. Can I knock on the door?
Like, such a good, that's such a good question to ask.
It's hard to know when you're actually in the firm, sort of how it works and what you can and shouldn't do. So your buddy your coordinator are the best people to ask because they work with these partners. They know how they operate. They can check their calendar, just simple things like that. Use your buddies as a resource.
Yeah. I got to say this with the greatest salt because I overthought every single thing that happened, but try and enjoy the experience because it is a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And I think another thing which we get questions about quite often is around, the nature of the clerkship and the process itself can be competitive, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I found that at Maddocks, and I think I've spoken about this before, but once you're into the clerkship itself, you make friends for life and the process itself doesn't feel competitive at all. And if anyone is extra competitive, they stand out like a sore thumb and it's not.
Don't be that person.
No, people and I haven't seen it. Since clerking and, as a grad and as a first year, seeing the different groups come through, every group is collaborative. They support each other. If anything, it goes the other way. And,
if you're trying to be really competitive throughout the process, I think it's actually going to backfire on you. And that the more that you all work together, the better off that you're all going to be. So don't be competitive.
Yeah. Strong words himself. And I think have fun, be yourself, be proactive, and get a feel for the kind of work that you think you might enjoy in the future. And for those that are lucky enough to have more than one clerkship, the clerkship itself is a really good way of getting an insight into the firm culture and whether you could see yourself having a career at that firm. So
that's all you want out of a clerkship, right? You just want to know, is this a place I can see myself working for the next couple of years? If you can work that out, then, good on you.
Yeah. And then, the process itself goes from summer 1 in November, December, Christmas break. There's a January, February slot, and then a June, July spot to leading into offer days, which is generally around the August time. So I hope those were some useful tips for you.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of you we get to see at Maddocks doing a clerkship
Hopefully.
in the coming year.
Always, if you have any questions about the clerkship process or what it is like here at Maddocks, feel free to reach out either via the Maddocks Instagram page or reach out to Sam and I. We're always happy to answer your questions. But that's probably enough of us waffling on about clerkships.
Yeah, let's lead in to our interview with Gavan and Caroline.
Let's do it.
Well, we're very lucky to have our guests here today. We've got Gavan Mackenzie and Caroline Atkins, both partners in our Canberra office, which opened about 11 years ago from this year. We're going to talk about all things government sector related, about the work they do and about the journey they've had to Maddocks and to the partnership. And so without further ado, Gavan and Caroline, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Caroline, I might start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the law and how you found yourself as a partner here at Maddocks?
Sure. Well, firstly, I should say that I didn't know anything about lawyers or what lawyers did. I'd only seen them on TV. I did meet a family friend when I was in high school who was studying law at the time, and I had a look at his textbooks and particularly the criminal law texts, and I thought that looked interesting, and that's literally why I applied for law. I was brought up in Hobart, but I decided to go on an adventure, so I applied for ANU and got into ANU. So I came out to ANU Law School. After I finished law school, I went back to Hobart and did articles there, but came back to Canberra basically chasing a man, which was successful, and have been here ever since. So I started off in one of the bigger firms and then moved into work in Parliament House for a while, which I loved, learned something about politics and politicians, and then was put on a public service program which enabled me to have a few stints in various different agencies, including PMC and DFAT. And I decided that my bent was commercial law. That was my subject area that I was always better at and enjoyed more at uni. So I took myself off to Attorney General's and was put in the team that was doing technology contracts. From there, when legal services were outsourced, the market was outsourced, I went back to the private sector in the mid-90s and joined a firm called Phillips Fox as a partner in the early 2000s. Phillips Fox became DLA Piper, and the DLA Piper team in Canberra, which included Gavan, moved across to Maddocks 6 years ago very happily, and Maddocks is now my fifth law firm and is country mile the best, and I love it there, and I love the government work that we do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Caroline. What a journey. And from my very short stint, I can't disagree with you that Maddocks is the best of the five. Gavan, over to you.
So I grew up on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, so a place called Woolgoolga, which is about, well, at that stage, it was about 5 hours from Brisbane and about 7 hours from Sydney. So it wasn't really in the middle of anywhere and not particularly cosmopolitan, very small town, about 5,000 people on the coast there. So my exposure and experience to the law was pretty limited. You don't come across it day to day. We only had 2 TV stations type of thing, so you weren't really being exposed to much outside of, walking down to the beach and going to school. And I remember my first conversation about law. I was a night filler at Big W, and one of the guys in the team there was going off to study law. And I remember at the time thinking, why would you want to be a lawyer? That just sounds like the pit. Like it just had no appeal to me whatsoever. Flash forward a couple of years and here I am at the ANU studying law, wondering how I got there. But I think I got there because I enjoyed debating, I enjoyed public speaking, I was good at English, and so words for me have always been something that I've enjoyed using, and it just sort of eventually found a natural appeal that that's what I would do. And I moved to Canberra because I thought Brisbane was too big and Sydney was too big, but Canberra was just right. And more importantly, I had a fascination with politics and bureaucracy and things like that. So Canberra was a natural place to gravitate to. About 20 years ago now, it's changed a lot. I found myself applying for articled clerkships and ended up interviewing with Caroline. She was one of the partners that first interviewed me as a university student walking off the street into a law firm for the very first time, telling them why I wanted to be a graduate lawyer. And in that journey, I came across when Maddocks was looking to expand its offices in Canberra. And we essentially came across in that process. And as part of that process, I was a special counsel and became a partner as I moved laterally across to Maddocks. 6 years ago, we just celebrated so to speak, the anniversary 2 days ago was the anniversary of when we joined. So it's been a journey. It's been a wonderful journey. And did I ever think I'd be an ICT lawyer? No, but that's where I ended up. I think because I was working with people like Caroline and a couple of the other partners here in the Canberra office, and having experienced a range of subject matters like administrative law and the like, it's sort of just where I ended up being, not by design, but just by luck, coincidence, and enjoying what I do.
How exciting. It's such an interesting journey that you've both had into the law, and it's a tale as old as time, I feel, amongst lawyers especially, where all of a sudden people have just kind of fallen into this area, and it's an area that they love because of the work that they're doing and the people that they work with. You both do very interesting work within your respective spaces, specifically doing a lot of commercial work for government clients. Caroline, can you maybe just expand a little bit to give our listeners a broad overview of what it is that your team does and what you specialise in?
Well, it's been a lot of things over a lot of years, but right at the moment, we specialise in doing these whole of government agreements that I mentioned. So the government worked out about 20 years ago that it spends a lot of money with some of the biggest vendors in the technology industry. So it decided it wanted to consolidate its purchasing power and negotiate a deal that reflected, an arrangement that was suitable for the whole Commonwealth. So that's how we were brought in to negotiate with people like Microsoft, IBM and Amazon, and there's a whole raft of them. So we've specialised in that area and been the main legal service provider for those agreements for about 20 years, maybe even longer. I mentioned earlier that I started off in Attorney Generals in the technology team. That's what that team was set up to do. So I'm probably the sole surviving member of that original team in Canberra. They're really interesting arrangements to negotiate because you're dealing with very powerful vendors. We're dealing with general counsel who aren't Australian based, don't understand the Australian environment or the Commonwealth framework. They're very powerful, they're very strong, they have a very narrow view of the world, they have a lot of bargaining power. So we need to work very hard to get an acceptable outcome for the Commonwealth on those arrangements. We also work on setting up something called technology marketplaces, and where accredited providers are able to provide specific goods and services to Commonwealth agencies on specific terms, pre-agreed terms. But in amongst all of that, we also do a lot of technology policy implementation work. And in working for the government, one of the advantages is that you get very deeply involved in the project from the beginning to the end. I found in comparing what I do every day to some of my private sector counterparts that they tend to be brought in at a later stage and given a fairly narrow remit. We often get to sit in meetings with very senior public servants, occasionally even ministerial people, where they're working out what the policy should be and we're working out how that can be implemented into a policy. For example, at the moment, one of the biggest issues facing the government is cybersecurity. And part of the Commonwealth's approach to cybersecurity is to implement some very specific policies. And we've been part of the journey in developing that policy and working out how to apply it. And then we've been asked to go off and negotiate it with people like Telstra and all of the vendors that you hear about as being potentially at risk of cybersecurity events. So it's really fascinating to be involved with the people who understand the technology side of it as well as the practical side of it. So we've learned, it's just an in-depth involvement that is like nothing I think anyone experiences anywhere else. But aside from that, there's a lot of projects that affect people on a day-to-day basis that the government does that we get involved in. We do a lot of welfare support projects, technology contracts to support welfare programs. We deal with scenarios that involve specific people and issues, and we are tasked to try and negotiate contracts that are designed to implement the policy, but also to protect the general public. So we do a lot of data privacy and data security. We draw on our privacy team to help with that. So I guess it's an incredibly varied role. No single day is the same. We do some very tough negotiations. I think Gavan and I have both learnt to be very clear, thoughtful, pre-planned negotiators. And I guess we get to hone our skills in negotiation probably to a much greater degree than many of our private sector counterparts, because we often lead the team for the government. We will lead the team of technical people, pricing people, policy people, etc. So it's really, it keeps us on our toes. I think we're often the person in the room that everyone's relying on to both speak, keep notes, record actions, do the follow-up. So that's why we have such a good team that works with us. It helps us out with all of that. But I don't think anyone that works with us would say that they're for 1 second bored any day of the week. I should follow that with one postscript because it sounds like I work 24 hours a day. One of the things I'm really big on is work-life balance. I've grown up in Canberra with children and a husband who has a busy business in his own right, and neither of us have had any family support whatsoever. So I've always, made an effort to try and make sure that I don't give clients unrealistic deadlines. I did come up in the 90s and work for partners who did that and worked round the clock to try and do it. A lot of people who work with us are parents, have children, have school demands and things like that. So we run a practice that is very responsive. We aim for a very high degree of quality, but we also try to make sure that we work as a team. So if one person's having trouble with something, got a time issue, there's always someone else in the team that can pick it up. And I think what I've tried to do is do a lot of what I learned was the wrong way to do it in the 90s, because I came through that M&A kind of 80s, 90s thing, where to work in a law firm, you were literally expected to be there all night if they wanted you to be, and we don't run our practice that way.
It's good to hear the work-life balance is still there. Yeah, it's definitely the industry's changed a lot for us now as first years. It's been a very nice and great environment to learn in. Gavan, before we jump to you, Caroline, I might ask, you talk about some really, really interesting works that affect people on a daily basis, particularly when dealing with policy work and government related work. Is that something that excites you, that you get to work on projects, that you get to see the ripple effect through the community, not just at a local or state level, but federally?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of anything more exciting than being part of a team who is trying to work out what the government should do to improve the lives of everyday Australians. To be in those sorts of meetings is absolutely wonderful. And of course, because we're in a law firm and not in a specific agency, we get a very broad range. Another great project that Gavan and I worked on some years ago when the policy supported it was we negotiated a contract for a carbon tax system. So it was a technology system that would deal with carbon tax credits. And when the government changed its policy and decided not to go with that approach, we then negotiated a mothball agreement to put the system into mothballs for 2 years and have it maintained. And during that 2 years, at any time, if the government's policy changed, they'd be able to go back to that vendor and know that the system that they paid for was available if they wanted it. So that was really interesting. I'd never done a mothball agreement before.
I'm going to say, I was telling someone about that very negotiation today because it was in the peak of summer. This is probably doing nothing to sell the law to anybody, but it was in the peak of summer, middle of January, a 42-degree day. We're on the top floor of this building with what seemed to be zero insulation, and we were negotiating the liability provisions and indemnities. So, really, really blood-boiling stuff. And it was just so hot and so uncomfortable. No one wanted to be there, but it still sticks in my mind as one of the most memorable negotiations just because of its sheer uncomfortableness. But yeah, we enjoyed it nonetheless.
And I remember having to tell myself that day, one of the key skills of a good negotiator is never to show any emotion. We're all so hot, we're all so frustrated. It was really hard to stay calm and collected and considered that day.
But we got there.
It sounds like one of those old movies where they like turn up the heat or they turn on the cooling to try and rattle the other side. Exactly.
That's great. There's absolutely no doubt that the work that you do is extremely diverse and very varied, and obvious that type of work is exciting, and it's no wonder that you're drawn to that type of work. Gavan, can you maybe expand a little bit on some of your highlights? What are the most memorable things that you've worked on, if you could share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think I'll give you a couple of recent examples. As Caroline said, we've collectively worked on some very, very broad range of matters, ranging from, helping refugee settlement services through to procuring defence vehicles or arms. A couple of the memorable ones for me are when we were going through COVID, we were appointed by the ACT government to help them negotiate a software system for the digitisation of all the health records in the ACT. So that's a huge project, and that was all designed to make the running and administration of all the health elements in the ACT really efficient, connected, so that people just had one digital health record and that would serve them throughout their entire medical journey. To do that, we had to negotiate with a software provider who was going to provide that software, a big multinational software provider. We were in the room negotiating. Again, I'm doing nothing to sell the law here, I'm sorry, but at 5 a.m. Canberra time, because this company was based in the US and we needed to get the deal done. But it was exciting because you got to trope down in pitch black, because it was the middle of Canberra winter, have some argy-bargy with a big software vendor, knowing that the system you were going to get and the reasons you were doing that was going to result in a world-class digital health system for the ACT. And that was really rewarding. And, as you're doing that, you know why you're doing it. It's not to make someone money. It's to make the lives of citizens better in some way. And, a few months later, we had to fast track everything because COVID had hit. And suddenly on your phone, you're downloading the app that allows you to book in for your COVID vaccination using the software that I'd just been negotiating the contracts for. So it was a real obvious, I've been doing this and now it's on my phone and now I've clicked book and now I've gone and got my COVID jab. And that's a real journey that you've seen from woe to go. And you can see how your assistance has really actually contributed to that outcome. So I find that very rewarding. Another example was, again, in COVID, when all the travel restrictions hit, air freight stopped because most air freight is actually traveling on passenger jets. And with the lack of passengers, there's no freight going out of the country. And so with no freight going out of the country, exporters suffer. And so in order to protect the revenue of exporters and to make sure that, our economy didn't tank, they had to get planes back in the air and getting goods out of the country. So we helped set up a panel of airplane freighters to get goods out of the country. I think it was nicknamed Lobster Air, I think, at one point, because it was helping to get Tasmanian lobsters out of Tasmania over to Asia, where the market was the strongest. And we're working furiously to get that up and running because it was vitally important to the economy to get exports up and out. It needed to happen. And again, working on that was really rewarding because you can see the direct, tangible benefits of what you've just done.
Gavin, I think you're doing quite the opposite of not selling the law. It's that sounds.
I was going to say with some of those things, you're working over, Easter or, early in the morning, but that's pretty rare. And when it does happen, you're like, oh, this is exciting because, like I said, you know what's happening and you know why you're doing it. So you're willing to spend that time to get that outcome.
Yeah, it sounds, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to quote Hamilton here, but it really sounds like you guys are in the room where it happens and seeing the sausage get made. And it's like, as a uni student, that's the kind of working on things that make a real impact on society and you get to see the tangible outcome. I think that's what you look forward to. And I think that's worth the sacrifice of going through law school. And that's the kind of exciting stuff you want to work on. So that's great to hear the kind of work you guys do. So we've got a lot of uni students and, people applying for clerkships and graduate programs who I'm sure now are going to be chomping at the bit to come and work with you guys in your team. What kind of work can a junior expect to do in your team, whether you're a seasonal clerk or a graduate or a first-year lawyer?
Well, usually a junior would be working on multiple of our projects. So I always try to get our juniors to attend the meetings with the client so they can see what the project is about. One thing that you don't learn at university is kind of how to write these sorts of technology contracts. You learn about the law, but you don't learn about the application of it. So we lead our juniors in reasonably gently, so they sit in the meetings, they help us keep a record of it. We will then produce the documents required and we'll get them to help us check that the documents have got what we said we'd do in the meeting. As our juniors travel on, so I've got a great junior with me at the moment, I've only had it for 6 weeks, so I told her this morning, this is what we need in this document, can you please draft it? And so she's had a go at doing that. So we draw them into having a go at the real work as quickly as we possibly can. The back end of these projects does require us to do a lot of either research. So for whole of government agreements, we do a lot of research about the vendors that we're dealing with and their standard approaches. There's a lot of document production. We've got obviously very good precedents. We've got to think about how to make them work for the particular project. I guess one of the advantages of government work is that we don't tend to end up having to use boring templates where you just fill in a schedule at the back. We do a lot of creative writing for our projects because every project's different and we're doing policy implementation. So I've just been literally on the phone this afternoon with our current junior working through a performance framework for a new contract for the Future Fund in Melbourne. And it's all about this particular vendor and what we need them to do and how we're going to measure them and what's going to happen if they don't meet those measures, how we're going to ping their pay each month and things like that. So, once you get your head around that sort of concept, it's very valuable for any commercial work you do in the future. So we recognise that they're not going to be able to sit down on day one and produce the contract, but they will be able to certainly provide a valuable role. We can't do our job without our juniors. They're fantastic. We love having juniors on the team.
It's very true what you say, how law school teaches you about the law, but it doesn't teach you about the application. So it can sometimes seem like a very steep learning curve. So I'm sure it's very comforting for our listeners to know that they're not just thrown in the deep end and they'll be guided through the process. And I'm sure they'll be developing a very broad skill set within your team. Gavan, some of our listeners are about to begin going through the application process and interviews for clerkship. Can you maybe expand a little bit on the skills and qualities that you look for within candidates and what sort of sets out a successful clerk candidate through the interview phase as well as once they're within the firm?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned earlier, I was also a summer clerk, so I had to go through the summer clerk process as well as it was many years ago now. A little bit different back then, I think, but I've experienced what many people will soon experience, and so I understand the thoughts and feelings that you might have in terms of applying for that. I think the key thing is to be true to yourself. Don't try and be someone you're not. We will see through that immediately if someone's not being their genuine self. And so I think that's really important. And particularly here at Maddocks, where we have a culture of fostering individuality and letting people be who they are, we don't want people who aren't going to be their genuine selves at work. And that starts from day one in terms of interviewing. So, be genuine to yourself. And that goes to things like if you don't really know what you're after, that's fine. You don't need to know what you're going to be when you grow up. I'm still trying to work that out, and I've been practicing as a lawyer since, 2000 and something. Be honest about what your objectives are. Be honest about what your strengths are, what you enjoy doing. Because I think that honesty and that, that sense of self really shines through. And it's important for us to sort of see that in you because we want lawyers who are acting with integrity and pride in themselves and the work they do and the people they work with, that we're looking for that in addition to just people who have, excellent legal skills and excellent experience in the workplace, etc. I would do some research about the firm. I would understand what Maddocks is, what it's about, what the work is that we do. If you're meeting with people, have a sense of who they are and what they do. Not only I think that shows respect for the organisation you're actually, applying for, but it helps you have a conversation with those people as well. And it helps you to demonstrate enthusiasm and curiosity about what those people do and what you might be doing in that role, because it's as much for you to learn about us as it is for us to learn about you. And if you don't have that knowledge or have not done any basic research about the firm, the type of law they do, etc., it makes very stilted conversation, or it can, and it shouldn't be us as the partners or the other lawyers who are participating in these interviews or networking events that drive the conversation. I think we probably get frustrated seeing a lot of these if we're always the ones doing the talking and not coming up with the ideas or the topics of conversation or asking insightful questions about particular areas. So I think if you have that background, you can do that much more easily, much more readily. And I think that curiosity, that inquisitive nature is really important because we don't, as Caroline said, expect you to know everything when you walk in that door. That's unrealistic. We're not expecting that. What we are expecting is that you do have a sense of curiosity, a willingness to learn, a commitment to learn and to know where to look and how to improve. And I think that starts at that interview stage as well.
Fabulous advice, Gavan. It rings consistent from what we've heard from other partners that it's a two-way process. It's about the firm getting to know the candidate, but also the candidate getting to know the firm and being your genuine self. Make sure that you end up in the work environment that suits you. And whilst I could probably ask you guys a million more questions about the type of work that you do, I'm going to ask one question each. If you could just give any career advice to your younger self, if you could go back in time now.
Firstly, the law is a very broad area and you do need to find your niche and don't be afraid to move on if you're in the wrong niche. The other thing is you've got to be able to enjoy the people that you work with, I think, and Gavan's absolutely right. Maddocks is very open and very welcoming of people being exactly who they are, and we love that. In terms of myself, I reckon I should have been a bit more confident earlier. I kind of sat back a bit too early in my career. People suggested that I should apply for the next level or a promotion, and I sort of said, oh no, I don't think I'm ready for that. I'm not going to do that yet. I need another year or whatever. And I should have jumped up and just gone for it like the boys around me. Came through that era where the girls were a bit too reticent, I think.
I think what's really benefited me is having very good champions for me in my career over the period. And Caroline has been there actually all the way. She was one of my first bosses, and now we work together as partners in the same firm and together with others as well. They were very good at supporting me and championing me and making sure that I had the opportunities that I wanted. To get there, it's incumbent on me to make, what I want known. But finding those champions, I think, is really important, and being able to work with them and learn from them and grow with them has been absolutely immeasurable in my career path. And I wouldn't be here without that support. So I think find the people that you enjoy working with, find the people that you enjoy learning from, find the people that you consider to be experts in their field, so that you're working with the best of the best, so that you can become the best of the best as well, is probably what I'd say to anyone who's thinking about a career in the law. And never stop learning. Always use your mind to think, why is this happening? Why is this the case? Why am I doing that? Because without that understanding, you'll never know, and you'll never grasp, why something is happening and what the actual legal issues are. So always keep that mind on.
I'm sure that people will have no doubt finding great mentors and really be able to lean on their networks here at Maddocks. I know that Sam and I have greatly benefited from our networks that we've developed here over the last year of our grad program. So take comfort in the fact that I'm sure all of the listeners and any clerks coming through will be able to do the same. And Caroline, it's so interesting what you said about imposter syndrome and not having the confidence to do things. I think it's something that Sam and I talk about on a podcast, and it's something that I'm sure everyone suffers from and goes through. So it's very interesting and comforting, I suppose, to hear that we're all in the same boat together. We would absolutely love to chat to you both all day, and we have learnt so much about your practice group and are sure that our listeners will take a lot out of this interview. So thank you for sitting down with us and sharing some light on your team. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Day 1 series brought to you by Maddocks on the Mic. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe to wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode of the show. For more information on any of the topics discussed in this episode, visit our website, maddocks.com.au.